Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome back to another episode of the PlayStation 2 Legacy bonus content. I like to do these bonus content mostly to talk about stuff that is related to the PlayStation 2, whether it's like some kind of recent news or discussion, or just something that I just felt like adding on to it. Today's episode, I want to talk about more specifically, region games. Now, what do I mean by region games? Well, much like any console, the PlayStation 2 has had games that are only available in selected countries. Most specifically, games that are only released within Europe and Japan. This makes it kind of hard as someone who loves the PlayStation 2, who never will be able to get to experience these games truly unless A, I was able to acquire a region-locked PlayStation 2, being that of Europe or Japan version, or I just emulate it, because how else am I going to play these games? And the funny thing is too, is that there's no like real legitimate reason as to why they were never available to America to begin with. There could be a number of reasons, some of which could be like age restriction type deals or something like that. But then again, you got mature content games in which why not just have it released anyway, because there's already mature content out there. What's preventing you from releasing it here in the States to begin with? It's one of those things where there's not a lot of details to go on, and unfortunately there's no way of actually knowing why some of these games never became available here in the United States. As such, though, the reason why I want to talk about this is more specifically that recently, and by recently I mean a couple months ago, I found out about a particular title by the name of, and I'm gonna butcher this name really badly, Kamiwasa Way of the Thief. And this one was kind of like on my list of games that I was kind of like looking into and stuff like that. This was whenever I was kind of like experimenting with emulation and stuff like that. And I noticed some of these titles said Europe or Japan specifically. And I was like, so these are the games that never got released in America for whatever reason. And whenever I saw the title of the name, I thought it looked familiar. And I looked back at my list and I realized this was one of those games that never became available in the United States. So I was like, this is perfect. This is the best way that I'm going to be able to play these games, is if they get re-released, hopefully they would eventually get re-released, onto PlayStation Store. Unfortunately, though, this is a very poorly listed title. By poorly, I mean it's not even categorized within the classic games. It's labeled as though as if it's its own game, or even for that matter, people could easily mistake it as like some kind of indie development game or something like that, when in reality, it's actually a re-release from a previously PlayStation 2 game that we never got in the United States. So it's one of those things where it's like, they really need to work on labeling some of these games so that way people will have a little bit more in-depth knowledge about these games, especially for people like myself who love to go back into the PlayStation 2 and see what games are available, or games that I might have missed out that I never got a chance to play whenever I was playing the PlayStation 2 back in the day. So it's one of those things where it's like, it bothers me of how this isn't an official PS2 listing category, and at the same time, Sony's obvious flaw of not being able to list this stuff. I do plan on making a video of talking about that at a later point in time. But with that being said, though, after seeing that, it made me think to myself, would there be a possibility of seeing other PlayStation 2 games that were Europe and Japan only that we never would be able to get? And that is something that I would love to see one day. I would love to be able to see the ability to have these games available in the PlayStation Store. Because, I mean, hell, if I'm going to be able to play them outside of it, because A, I don't have the region console category to play those games, and B, the only way I would be able to play them is through emulation. And I mean, I could easily do that. I'm sure I probably might do like a side series of PlayStation 2 Legacy where we actually dive into these region-only games and stuff. That may be something, a potential series that I would like to do at some point in time, but it's just one of those things where it's like, I would really like it if Sony would try to like dedicate a team to get certain PS2 games that we never gotten here in the States. I want to see that so badly. Will we ever do that? Will they ever do that? Probably not. They probably will only do it like very mildly, but there may be some reasons as to why they haven't done this, either due to licenses problems or restrictions, whatever reason they've got. It's out there, and we have no way of being able to do anything about it, except for, obviously, emulation. And most companies don't want us to do emulation, but you know what? If we want to play these games and they're not available in our country, how the hell are we supposed to do it, right? I mean, people use NordVPN or Surfshark VPN or whatever VPN that's out there nowadays in order to watch movies and films that are not available in your country. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. I'm just saying this. You know, it's like they've made certain restrictions to where we can't do what we want to do. And it's like, how else are we going to do it, right? If you don't like what we do, then make it available for everybody. Don't just restrict it to where we can't do it, right? But at any rate, though, I figured, why not list the games that are only available in Europe and Japan that I specifically would like to someday play that isn't available at the moment right now. Now, this is not like a top 10 per se. This is just games that I just happen to have had in my list of games that I would like to eventually play at some point in time. So let's just go ahead and talk about them as we go through the entire video. The first one, and most popular one that a lot of people, especially collectors who are familiar with, known as Gregory Horror Show. Now, this is kind of a weird game, and by weird, I mean it's weird as in interesting. Supposedly, this was a Japan exclusive show, or something like that, that never became available in America, for obvious reasons, probably. But one of the things was that they had a PS2 game available. And essentially the goal is to, in a weird way, survive this horror mansion hotel type thing, where you have creatures who have lost their souls due to an unforeseen event or some kind of being who has taken that soul from them. And so your goal is to try to get the soul from that other being. And that being will eventually try to track you down to take back the soul. And it's a weird game, but I love the art style of it. The art style of it is so unique. It's kind of Animal Cross-esque, if you will, in a weird way. It's kind of a weird game look. It's a weird game look. But I love how weird it is. I love how unique the gameplay is. It's just a unique game that you wouldn't ordinarily see in a normal PlayStation 2 game. And I as you've seen in the past, I like to kind of dive into kind of the weird and the unusual. And this is definitely weird and unusual enough to be warned that as to why it never became available in the United States, especially for as popular as it's become due to collectors and stuff like that. I have no idea of. But yeah, it's a unique game that I wouldn't mind. Dragon Sisters. The only thing that I know of right offhand about this game is that it's like a beat-em-up style game. A very unique beat-em-up game, per se. So say, for example, I think the best description that I can say that I'm familiar with whenever I saw a trailer for this one is that it's sort of like the Bouncer game. You know, the Bouncer game for the PlayStation 2 that Square Enix made years back. That was something that I actually enjoyed it. I liked it, how it played out and stuff like that. And whenever I saw gameplay footage of Dragon Sisters, I was like, this looks like it'd be something interesting. Unfortunately, it was also available outside of the United States, obviously. Seven Blades. This looks relatively interesting. I don't know why the name Seven Blades comes to being. But whenever I saw the gameplay of it, I thought it looked interesting enough for me to add onto the list as well. So, yeah, that's just all it is. It just looks interesting to me. Oh boy, this one's going to be an interesting title to pronounce. Bakuin Katsushi Neverland Sekai Zero. I have no idea how I'm pronouncing any of this shit, and if I've offended anybody, I apologize in advance. Trust me whenever I say this, we're gonna be seeing more of me trying to pronounce this stuff, and it ain't gonna work very well. But whenever I saw the gameplay footage of this one, I thought it also looked interesting as well. Again, no major depth reason, I just saw gameplay of it and I thought it just looked interesting. Code of the Samurai, obviously, this looked interesting to me as well. for it being a samurai game and stuff. There's a lot of samurai games that's also available for the PlayStation 2, aside from like the obvious Samurai Jack. There was like Way of the Samurai, and then of course you have like certain games, for example, Dynasty Warriors, I believe there's another series, Ocean Warrior or something like that, which I'll eventually dive into at some point in time. But there's a lot of games that kind of has a similar samurai fighting game, and again, as a fan of samurais, knights, and stuff like that, I wouldn't mind diving into this one. Deadly Strike, again, a unique gameplay that I thought would be cool to go into and stuff eventually at some point in time. It just looks like it'd be fun to play. Demon Chaos, once again, very cool looking gameplay. I wanted to check it out eventually at some point in time. You're going to see a trend here. Whenever I saw a title of a game that is outside of the United States, and I look at it and I go, I would like to play this at some point in time. Where can I find this? And then I find out that it's outside my country, and then I'm like, of course it is. Why would it not be? Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy in Itaki Street Special? I have no idea. Essentially, this is kind of a Mario Party, but Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. And that is weird that this never got available outside of Japan. When I saw this, I was like, okay, some cases I can understand. Because of how popular Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy is, why hasn't this become available outside? They're still making the game series today, but I have yet to see like an American release title of this. And it's like, really? Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, two popular RPGs that you have under your belt, and you don't release this version, or any of the versions for that matter. Why? I don't know. It's so weird. I would love to dive into it eventually, but it's just one of those things where it's just like, it infuriates me to know that we never would have a chance to play this outside of it. Evil Twin Cryptian's Chronicles? I don't know the actual name per se, but when I saw this, I was like, wow. I can see kind of why this wouldn't be available in America, but then again, if it's labeled as a rated mature game, I don't see the reason why not. It's definitely weird and creepy, but whenever I saw gameplay of it, I kind of liked it, but then I saw like some of the creature design that they have, and I'm just kind of like, this looks really interesting. And you know, again, it's one of those things where it's like the way the art style looks and the design of the characters and stuff, I really would like to kind of dive into this because of how unique it looks. It looks different and unique, and I like to experience it at some point in time. Exus, this one, however, though, unlike some of the other previous titles that I've talked about, this one's more of an on-rail shooter game, it looks like, and again, it just looks interesting to me. Oh, for the love of gosh, how do you go about pronouncing this title? Fuun Shinsin Gumi? Japan is going to hate me after this video, and if there are any of you watching this, I apologize to the up heavens, to your ancestors, to anybody in genuine. I apologize. I don't know how to pronounce any of this stuff. But again, the gameplay, traditional samurai action game, it looks interesting to me. Final Armageddon. It kind of looks like an on-rail shooter, but at the same time, it also looks somewhat different in a way. I just thought it looked interesting, and again, I just wanted to dive into this. G-Survivor, more specifically Gundam Survivor. With as many Gundam games that's been available for the PlayStation 2, it's no wonder this one didn't get available outside of the United States. Either this was released early or late in the lifespan of the PlayStation 2, and for some odd reason, it just never got released to the States. It just seems kind of weird. I don't know why. Mangan Shao Demon Sword. Now, I don't know if this got released under the same company that did the Shin Megami Tensei series, but when you see the art style of this, it does kind of have that reminiscent feel of Shin Megami Tensei. That art style that we're kind of familiar with the series and stuff, it kind of looks it, but I do like how it is. It's very fascinating to me. Cielo Infinity. I imagine this is kind of an RPG game in a way, and as an RPG fanatic, I wouldn't mind diving into this one at some point in time. Now, the interesting thing is that Cowboy Bebop, you know, games, animes like Full Metal Alchemist, Lupin the Third, Ghost in the Shell, you would think Cowboy Bebop would also have a game available in America as well. They've never released it for whatever reason. It's only available in Japan, I think, and if I'm not mistaken, probably in Europe. No, only available in Japan. I'm just now looking on the Wikipedia page as we speak to see if it's available in Europe or not, but it's only in Japan. Again, even weirder. But it's like, as popular as Cowboy Bebop is, you know, familiarized and stuff like that, not the live action one, we won't talk about that, the actual anime and then the movie and stuff like that, I'm very surprised that this never got available in America. It just bothers me to know that this isn't available. It weirds me out. It weirds me out that we hadn't gotten this, and yet here we are right now. Yet another anime. This one is not as well known, and I imagine back then it wasn't well known back then. Now it is more familiar. A lot of people are now more familiar with it thanks to like the Soul series and stuff like that. Berserker is now well known to this day. This game, however, though, Millennium Falcon, I believe is the surname that they give it, but is labeled as Berserker PS2 for some odd reason. But when I saw this, I was like, this looks like it'd be a good one. But then again, it could be because of the fact that Berserker wasn't well known back then. So I imagine that's why they just didn't bother releasing in America. Probably due to lack of sales and lack of interest. Now that the Berserker series is well known to the public now, I imagine it would be okay to release this particular game now on the PlayStation Store, probably. Hopefully, but who's to say if it will. The Sword of Aether, I'm not sure. But here's what's interesting. I didn't know about this until Metal Jesus Rocks did his video series on like different region games, and this one was only available in Japan and Europe. But whenever he was playing it and stuff like that, he kind of gave it a weird description of like, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz meets a Japanese RPG game. And I'm like, huh? I don't know if that's actually the case. That seems kind of a weird description to give it to and stuff. But whenever I saw the gameplay, I was actually fascinated by it. And again, gameplay, interesting. Be sure to look it up later on in time or something like that. Again, another one that I would like to play. Code Age Commander. It has another name that goes along with it. I'm not going to bother labeling that. That's too much of a labeling to talk about. I'm just going to call it Code Age Commander. Gameplay looks interesting. Again, like I've stated before in the past, I wouldn't mind playing it. It just looks interesting. Now, I'm putting this last because technically, if I'm not mistaken, it is available on the PlayStation Store, somewhere on there. I'm pretty sure I did see it. Either on the PlayStation 3 only, or available on the PlayStation 4 as well. I have to look into it later. But, Alter Beast for PS2. Technically, it's also gotten a previous release before this time, but this one's a different Alter Beast. Whenever I saw gameplay of it, I saw it looked fun and entertaining, and I just wanted to get into it. I don't know how many games that is in total, but those are just games that I have whenever I just briefly glance at like emulation and stuff like that, and just seeing games. And then of course, thanks to people like Metal Jesus Rocks talking about these games that's only been available in certain countries and stuff like that. These are games that I've just found that I want to play eventually at some point in time. And these are games the gameplay looks interesting, looks fascinating. Some of them, some people are familiar with them, some people are not so well familiar with, for obvious reasons, of course. But it's just one of those things where it's like, there are a lot of games outside of the United States that we never got, and I wouldn't mind diving into some of these ones. And hey, if you are familiar with these categories and stuff like that, list them down in the description below. If there's a game that I have not talked about that you think that I would be interested in, and you'd be like, hey, check out these games. They've never been released in America. These games look like they'd be interesting and stuff. List them down below, and I'll be sure to add them onto the list so that way I can go back into them and play them at some point in time. These are just games that I had just found, and I'm like, I want to play them at some point in time whenever I get a chance to. One way or another, eventually I'm just going to make an emulation machine and just play these games emulated and stuff like that, because obviously I don't think we're ever going to get these released on the PlayStation Store, or if we do, I'm not going to know about them, sadly. Seriously, I wish Sony would do better at labeling these games, because quite frankly, as someone who is invested with the PlayStation 2 and stuff like that, I really would like to play more games that are on the PlayStation 2 that I just never got to experience myself, you know? But at any rate, those guys, thank you so much for watching. Again, let me know in the comments below of any other PlayStation 2 games that are outside of the United States that I never labeled, that you think, oh, maybe you might be interested in looking at this and stuff like that. Let me know in the comments below. I wouldn't mind doing this at a later point in time. But thank you so much. See you next video. Catch you guys later.